Welcome to Chats at Arcadia. I'm Dan,
And I'm Mike.
and each week we explore topics that have recently captured our attention and will hopefully capture yours too. Let's dive in. So, Mike, it's our second episode of the podcast now.
We are exponentially increasing.
Yeah. It's going to be twice as good as the last one.
We have doubled the number of episodes.
Yeah, and at this rate, we're just going to go to the moon.
And beyond, indeed.
And, that guy, I guess, it makes me wonder, what was the peak in my life? Well, what was the peak in your life?
I think that last year of university, I had moved out of home finally and was flatting with some friends. I was just finishing off my degree, so I didn't have to do as many papers as I usually did, so university was easy. I just chilled. I was ready for what was coming, and I could just have fun, have good chats, and live pretty independently, but with my friends.
That's a fascinating one. There weren't any stresses with your final year?
No, I was really just cleaning up, trying to just finish off the degree requirements. And by that point, I'd been at university for 5 years already. And I sort of knew what was expected of me by a university paper, so I could schedule that in and then have free time essentially the rest of the time.
And did you have a job lined up for after you finish uni?
I didn't. So I was looking for a job, and that was something I spent all my extra time doing. But I was fairly confident that I would be able to find one. Someone had come and spoken to us at the university, and his point was, as a graduate, you can feel pretty useless and not very valuable if companies aren't interested in you. But a graduate is actually valuable, and a company will pay money for you. So you just need to find one. So that was quite comforting in a sense of being it's like having, my time is valuable. So it's like I have a pot of gold, and I just need to find someone with enough money to buy it. So I wasn't very insecure about not being able to find a job. So that added to my sense of, this is a fun, relaxed time of my life.
Interesting. Because, I technically did have a job lined up because I was doing an internship at a software company in my last year, right? And it wasn't a job that I particularly enjoyed, and I saw kind of limited growth, career growth coming out of it. So for me, I kind of wanted something else out of it. So even though I had a job lined up, there was a bit of anxiety and insecurity there. It's like, oh, am I going to be doing that for the next couple of years of my life? I wasn't too sure. But it's interesting to hear that you were just so comfortable with that situation yourself, and you didn't even have a job lined up.
Yeah, I was pretty relaxed, I guess. What about you? When did you peak in life?
I've asked this question to a few people, and my answer is a bit unpopular in that I think I peaked in life in high school.
Oh, you're one of those.
Yeah, no, because the way I see it, right? In high school, I had zero responsibilities. And the only thing I need to be responsible for is making sure I don't die, which is pretty easy to do. When you've lived long enough, you figure out what kills you and what doesn't.
And in 17 years, that's what you'd figured out.
Yeah, exactly. And in my last year of high school, I kind of met all the requirements to enter university already. So it was kind of my pseudo gap year. I was just kind of sitting in class, sitting in the back, chatting with my friends and being on my phone. I was not paying attention to the classes whatsoever because I didn't need any more credit.
Right.
I was just kind of playing around, doing extracurriculars, going to chess tournaments, debating tournaments, and the like. I was just having a grand old time. And
yeah, you were in a band too, right?
I was in a band, yeah. Played in a concert band, what we call a funk band, like a jazz band kind of thing.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, I think I was having the time of my life. I was more active than ever in terms of number of activities I was doing. yeah, zero consequences to the actual things that I was doing as well. And I felt very free, youthful, and just I didn't have a care in the world.
That is interesting, because often we think, when we've got rid of all the stuff that's worrying us, we will just relax, and that's what we want to do. But it's interesting that you point out, actually, when we are relaxed, we want to be doing things. And you found stuff that you liked, and you did it, and you were doing, as you said, the most number of things that you've done.
Perhaps it's not necessarily the number of things that I'm doing, but it's just the fact that the things that I was doing was mostly for leisure purposes. Like there wasn't, it's like I'm not filing my taxes so that I don't get sued by the government or something like that, right? It's a case of I'm just doing this for fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is a pretty unpopular opinion. A lot of people say that they hated high school, and most would even say, I'd say, that high school was the worst time of their lives.
Yeah, I would be in that camp. I guess I didn't have that many good friends in high school. Like, there were people I hung out with, but when we finished high school, I sort of stopped hanging out with them because I think we realized we're not actually friends. We were just kind of pushed together. I also found my high school quite stressful, but that's because I was doing this very stressful way of doing high school where you don't actually have any qualifications at the end of year 12. You get all your year 12 is just pretty chilled, you're just learning stuff. And then all your exams and all your assessments are at the end of year 13. So it was just this this time of just dread that you may lose everything. And also I was a bit competitive, but also probably not that successful in the competition. So I felt like I had to compete, even though I wasn't going to be in the top however many that gets recognized. So I guess I was busy and stressed, and yeah, I didn't have all like the relaxing hobbies that you had.
Yeah, that's a fascinating thing that you point out, and being like, I feel like all the stress that we have during schooling, during like education years, is often kind of self-inflicted. Because I mean, before my final year of high school, yes, I was also very ambitious, trying to achieve, be a top achiever academically, and just working really hard. And I even had that same drive in university as well. But what I feel like I mellowed out, as I said, in my last year of high school and also my last year of university, and I kind of came to the conclusion that trying to be this competitive at school is not really worth it. Like, you can, if you follow the simple Pareto principle, if you just with 20% of the effort, you can get 80% of the result.
Yes.
And then to get that final 20%, you need to put in 80% of the effort. That math just doesn't seem like it's worthwhile for me personally.
Yeah, that was my attitude towards university, because I thought, I'm here, and I wasn't going to be like, I want to get the top grades. I'd be like, I want to get the best grades to effort ratio.
Yeah, we were gaming the system.
Yeah, and that was enough for me. But I guess the consequences of that only affected me. Like, I guess now I'm working. If I was going for the best results to effort ratio, probably isn't great when you have like clients and superiors who are trying, they want the best results, not what's the most relaxed way that Michael can do this.
Yeah, well, so I think the secret there, well, at least the way I do it at work, but I make it look like I'm putting in a lot of effort, but realistically,
smart man.
I'll just stop it there.
All right. Well, we've talked about things that have been, really good times that we've peaked in life, and you're saying, high school often has a bad rap, but you had a really good time. I don't know, is there anything else that you think has a bad rap? Rap or rap?
Yeah,
It's reputation.
yeah, it's short for reputation, right?
But
So
everyone says rap.
yeah, that's a
Right?
weird thing. Oh, I forgot that there's a term for it where way people say words really quickly, and then it changes the way that people hear it. So then the best example I've heard of this is ice cream, right?
Mm.
Ice cream was originally iced cream, as in like frozen cream.
Uh-huh.
But then people just kept saying it quickly, ice cream, and then they just got, because they were saying it quickly, they just got rid of they couldn't hear the D, so it became ice cream.
Yeah, ice cream doesn't make sense. It's not the cream of ice.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But back to your question about what do I think has a bad rep. I'd say the things that I interact with. Okay, well, first of all, I think social media. I don't really do a lot of social media,
Mm.
but everyone talks about social media as if it's the devil. Like it's the worst thing for it's basically drugs on the internet. And I think it depends on how you use it personally. Like if you're using social media as a way to, stay connected with friends and family, it's a wonderful way of doing that. Like you can, because I come from Korea and all my family's over there, right? Being in touch with them back in like the year 2007 was really difficult, right? Like international calls were really expensive back in the day. And like there's no way to really, there's no cheap way or consistent way to contact them. It was quite difficult, right? And social media has been an absolute game changer, being friends with people all over the globe.
Right, but you're using it. Sounds like you're using it intentionally. You're not just doom scrolling and.
Yeah, like I mean, there are, for the most part, like I don't do things like Instagram, TikTok, that kind of thing. But that's not because I'm a disciplined person, but it's more of a case those things generally don't interest me. So I can understand for some people maybe how that can become an addictive behavior.
Yeah, I've come out of, you kind of go into a trance for an hour and a half just scrolling, looking at stuff, and you come out of it and you don't feel any better. You just like, oh, that was just a waste of time. But there's a positive element. It's being connected.
I think as is with most things, anything with a lot of power like social media can be used in a way for good and can be used in ways for bad. And I think people focus maybe a bit too much on the bad.
Yeah, interesting.
What would you say gets a bad rap?
I'm going a slightly different direction here. I quite like history, and I think something that gets too much of a bad rap in history is the Middle Ages.
The Middle Ages, like knights and kings and castles and dragons. Maybe not dragons.
I mean, everyone associates dragons and mythical creatures with that time, but it was really not really a mythical time. It was just people living their lives the best that they could. It also has a reputation of there being lots of war, there being lots of, torture, lots of dogmatic religious persecution of people.
There are some things like you kind of get this well, I get a picture in my head of like the aristocracy living wealthy, abundant lives, while the peasantry are struggling to make ends meet and just survive and put bread on the table. And ideas of mass famine, mass plagues, and people just dying at the age of 12 because they got a paper cut. So yeah, I guess it paints in my head. It paints a pretty bleak picture.
Yes, and there was some of that, but altogether that wasn't super common. So at the end of the 14th century, there was a bit of a climate. Well, it's going to sound a bit strange, but there was a big famine in Europe as a result of a climate disaster. It was just too cold to grow food, and then there were also diseases from trading ships. But altogether, the Middle Ages was also a time of wealth in Europe, and there was the reasons that you have, kings and castles, is because people were actually able to afford to build things like that. Same with these big cathedrals that still stand today that were built in like 1100.
Oh yeah.
And it was also a time where a lot of universities were founded. It was also this time of great learning. It was a time of scholarship as well. But yeah, we often hate it. And also, this is just thinking about Europe around that time. There were also a lot of fascinating things happening in the Middle East and in India and China. It was a time of wealth for them as well. Often we think of, the very worst part of the Middle Ages at the very worst time. So like the worst part of European history is what we think of in the Middle Ages. But actually there was a lot of things going on in that time that was really positive, even in Europe. So I think we really need to think, like this was a time in history that's we shouldn't try and distance ourselves from. Like this was a very active time, a very influential time that I think is undervalued.
So, would you say, by your assessment, were the Middle Ages overall like a positive era of humanity, or more negative? Like, if you had to put it on a sliding scale.
I think people often compare it to, we had the Roman Empire, and wasn't that sort of a great time in history? And then we had, science and industry and the Reformation and all of that, and a more sort of early modern era. Then we had this in-between time. Whereas I would probably say that distinction between that sort of early modern era, sort of that time of, like early scientific discoveries and big social change, I think that all had its roots in what we call the Middle Ages. So I'd probably say it was not a truly distinct time. So I'd probably say it was a bit of a lull compared to the Roman Empire and compared to the Industrial Revolution, but I still think it's a positive thing.
Kind of sounds like to me what you're suggesting is that we often look at the negatives of the Middle Ages, and that's what we associate with it. And the positive aspects of the Middle Ages are things that have carried on to the modern age, and thus we kind of take it for granted and we don't associate it with it. That is, I've never thought of it like that. I've got a question about what you mentioned about how it was a time of wealth for a lot of nations in the world during that time. You also mentioned that there was also times of mass famine.
Yes.
So how do you... Are you suggesting those two things happen at the same time, or are you saying there were different times of wealth and poverty, or they were wealthy in other ways other than having food?
I think overall it was a time of wealth. At that time it was still very agrarian, so how much money the world had really depended on the weather. And so there was I'm not exactly what caused it, but there was a time where Europe was just too cold for a while, and nothing was really growing. And then things started warming up. So I think we often, there was a famine for a short time, but there was also a growth in how much food was being produced. They also found new ways of developing food. So they used to leave fields bare for a while to what they called leaving them fallow, which essentially let the soil replenish itself before it was able to be used to grow food again. But what they found is you could just grow different food rather than leaving your fields fallow. So it essentially meant you would grow like wheat in an area for several years, and then it got replenished, and you could grow lentils in that same place, and that would replenish the soil and still be productive. So they essentially were able to double the amount of food they were producing, which is a huge step in wealth.
Oh, okay. So I didn't realize that crop rotation was something that was developed in the Middle Ages.
Yeah, it's a surprise. Well, it seems so obvious to us now, but that's a huge discovery to make.
Wow. Yeah, see that kind of speaks to a lot of my my engineering philosophy in our first year of engineering, they told us a quote from some big scientist guy. I don't remember his name, but he said that by the year 1900, the entire world will have died off from a massive famine because population is growing and our food production is not able to match it. And what ended up happening is that, civilization just found newer and better ways of producing and storing food. And our population's now, I think, triple what it was back in the 1900s. Yeah, the power of human innovation is quite astounding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's one of those things that separates us from animals. You know, with an animal, you're entirely dependent on the environment for how much you can reproduce, how much food you can get. But I think humans have a unique quality of being able to alter the environment in such a way to make it incredibly more productive for ourselves.
You know, speaking of animals, sorry, I'm just going to butt in here with a completely different topic. We've been talking about things that get too much of a bad rep, but you see, Mike, I see the world in a very different lens. I think that the world loves to overhype everything, and everything's amazing, everything's great. And like, I think the pinnacle of this phenomenon would be the human view of pandas.
Pandas?
Yes, pandas, you know, the endangered Chinese animal.
Oh, the cute and cuddly bears.
Yeah, we love seeing them in the zoo. We got to protect the endangered, right? So we have to protect them. We don't want pandas to be extinct. But here's an unpopular opinion. I think pandas are one of the single biggest mistakes in the animal kingdom.
Why is that?
Okay, so like pandas grow to these humongous sizes. They're bears, right?
Yes.
And in order to maintain their size and physique, they need to consume an enormous amount of calories.
Okay.
And what do they choose to eat? They choose to eat bamboo. They choose to eat grass to maintain themselves. And like very slow, it's not easy to digest grass.
Yes.
Right? It's incredibly fibrous thing. They chose the most inefficient way to gain energy. And you see pandas at the zoo and they're very slow, they're very lethargic, they don't move around a lot. Why do you think that is? Because they don't have any energy, because they're eating grass.
Yeah, all other bears eat meat most of them are omnivores, right?
Yeah, most of them are. A lot of bears, get their energy from fish or smaller game like rabbits or something. But pandas, they just decide, no, we're going to take the hippie route and just eat grass all day.
If bears became vegetarian.
Yeah, they're basically vegetarian bears, and it's an absolute failure in every single way.
Right. I think natural selection might have something to say about that.
Right? I'm not even finished, Mike. That's just one aspect that makes them an absolute failure of an animal. The second thing is they absolutely suck at reproducing. They just choose not to procreate.
Right. I see.
Zoos have such a hard time trying to get a male and a female panda to mate with each other. They just don't. They just lie there doing nothing. Right? What do you need? What do you need? Do you need like some candles, Michael Bublé playing, and just like, how do we get you in the mood? We're spending so much money trying to keep this animal alive. It clearly doesn't want to live. It clearly just wants to die out. The pandas said, we've had enough.
It's time for our species to end.
Our time has come to an end. Why are human beings still trying to keep this thing alive?
How have they lasted so long if they don't have if they have such poor reproductive instinct?
I have no idea. You look at rabbits, like they clearly want to live. They reproduce all day, every day. They know what they were doing. Yeah, they're trying to survive. But the pandas, they're taking the completely opposite route. They just said, you know what, we've had a good run, right?
Right.
Let's just
Yeah, I don't think, no matter how cute something is, if it just it's time to let nature have its say. And
yeah, because there are so many endangered species out there. There's this endangered species of mole rat that I saw. It's the ugliest thing you'll ever see. Right? Nobody's advocating to keep that thing alive. Nobody's putting them in zoos and trying to get them to mate with each other. You know, we're wasting all of this effort on an animal just because it's we
think it's cute.
We think it's cute.
What's that? You wouldn't actually cuddle a panda. Like, it is an actual bear. Like, we actually get no benefit from pandas at all, do we?
No. Well,
Uh,
we can take photos of them. That's about as much enjoyment we can get out of that.
Yeah, maybe as a culture, we're just too charitable. Time to let that species go. But yeah, it's the same. Someone was telling me about, they like to go hunting, and I was like, oh, what do you shoot? And he says, oh, I shoot rabbits and deer, and it was my instinct was being like, no, those are the cute animals. Don't like, can you shoot like rats and possums or something? But he was saying, no, we just think they are pests, but we just think they're cute, so we think we should protect them. But that's not objectively true. These are animals we need to get rid of.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not advocating to get rid of the panda. I'm just saying if you just leave them alone, they'll do that to themselves.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really get. We've arbitrarily decided some things are cute, and others aren't, and so because something is cute, it is worthy of preserving for some reason.
Crazy. Now you pointed out that is a very illogical state.
Well, I think that's us for today. Thanks for listening to Chats at Arcadia. If you enjoyed the episode, hit subscribe, leave a comment for any topics that you want us to cover in the future. Until next time, see you later.
Bye.